Now, by now, we all know how the left, the media, and the Democrats feel about Donald John Trump, don't we?
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis going, you here, you here. And I think we now have to flip it. And it's a given, the evilness of Donald Trump.
If you hold down the woman while the rapist is raping her, and you didn't rape her, are you a rapist?
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you, are you suggesting that they're racist, or they're...
Yes.
The people who vote, all the people who voted for Donald Trump were racist?
Yes.
If Republicans weren't so racist, they could encourage black people who are morally conservative to be on their side.
Those people who are supporting what he's doing here are racist, period.
It's movements and people that are speaking up for things, whether we're talking about civil rights movement, whatever else, those movements should be nonviolent, but they should not be non-confrontational.
And so these policies that this administration is putting forth are intentionally cruel, they are racist, and it is our job as citizens to speak out against that. Now, does that mean that we're going to be violent? No. But does that mean that Sarah Sanders can have a nice, quiet dinner with her family when she's taking our tax dollars to implement this policy? I don't think so.
Anybody who votes for and supports a racist is a racist.
Now, former President Barack Obama issued a statement about the killing of George Floyd. He said it ought not be normal. Good news, Mr. Former President. It's not normal. U.S. police officers have shot and killed the exact same number of unarmed white people as they have unarmed black people, 50 each. End of quote. Hey, I know this is a serious topic, but I just had a thought. What would happen if we found out that George Floyd voted for Trump?
What the f***?
Wait a minute, stay with me here.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
So if it turned out that George Floyd voted for Trump? So if George Floyd actually voted for Donald Trump, that means he really wasn't black. And as Joe Biden says, you can't grow a fro if you ain't voting for Joe. I guess this means all the people that took that loot, well, they have to return it. Now, President Trump, we've established, is not exactly well-liked by the left.
He is the worst. There is not any man like him anywhere in the world.
Now, when you dislike somebody, you assume the worst in them. For example, take this statement by Joe Biden.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
Now, when I first heard it, I thought he said, I'm going to beat Joe Biden. Listen to it again.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
Here's what Joe Biden said in context. I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to be Joe Biden. Look at my record. End of quote. Now, you see, it's because I don't think very much of Joe Biden. I don't think he's very smart. I don't think he's very bright. I think he makes a lot of mistakes. And so therefore, I assumed he said, I can beat Joe Biden. When in fact, if you look at it in context, he said, I can be Joe Biden. And that's my point. If you hate somebody's guts, you're going to assume the worst. And when you think of Donald Trump as a fascist, as a Hitler, as a Nazi, it doesn't matter what the man does. It doesn't matter what the man says. You're going to see him through that filter, and that's exactly how the left sees President Trump. But on the other hand, Joe does make it easy, doesn't it?
We cannot get reelected. We cannot win this reelection. Excuse me, we can only reelect Donald Trump.
Now, this brings us to Donald Trump referring to the looters as thugs. Here's what he said. These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty, and we will assume control, but when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you. End of quote. Oh my goodness, the fit hit the shan. He was accused of encouraging violence against protesters as opposed to looters.
President Trump said he did not know the racist history behind the phrase, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. It took him about 13 hours after he initially tweeted that to try and explain, eventually clarifying he was not calling for violence against protesters.
And wasn't the president making a distinction between protesters and looters?
All you got to do is look at Fifth Avenue, for God's sakes. I mean, it's horrible. And lawful protesting is as American as baseball. Men and women have died to protect that right in this country, on the battlefield and off. But if you don't know the difference between peacefully protesting and felony rioting, then you tested positive for stupid.
By the way, do you know who else used that controversial racist term? Thug?
A handful of protesters, a handful of criminals and thugs who tore up the place.
In a nutshell, the president's plan doesn't include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs.
Hillary Clinton accused Trump of, quote, inciting violence against American citizens. You mean like...
And so, let's stay the course. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Or do you mean like...
The Supreme Court is hearing arguments, as you know, for the first major abortion right cases since Justices Kavanaugh and Justices Gorsuch came to the bench. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
Now, it's not just that people who are accusing the police of engaging in institutional racism are just wrong. It's dangerous. It's causing the police to pull back. It's called the Ferguson Effect, and bad guys know it.
There was a study done in 2005, an economist at the University of Washington looking at the police riots in Cincinnati in 2001. And the economist found a clear correlation between officers backing off of that proactive, discretionary type of policing and a rise in felony crime. Chicago is, as you suggest, Doug, the primary example of what I've called the Ferguson effect. Last year, as crime was starting this very, very worrisome increase, U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch called an emergency meeting in Washington in October of big city mayors, police chiefs, and U.S. attorneys from across the country to discuss this crime increase. Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, came and he told the participants that Chicago cops, as he said, had gone fetal and they were less likely to interdict criminal behavior. That was 2015, when cops were already in Chicago reacting to this false narrative. This year, on top of last year's back off and depolicing, pedestrian stops in Chicago are down 82%. Homicides and non-fatal shootings are up nearly 50%. Again, you cannot talk to an officer. I was in Chicago in June. An officer said he has never experienced so much hatred on the streets in his 19 years on the job. He said it's basically an undoable job now.
And isn't the top job of government to protect people and property? And when the government fails to do that, well, that's why we have the Second Amendment. The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature. They disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve rather to encourage than to prevent homicides, for an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man, end of quote. Now, why are we in the streets of Minneapolis rioting? Because of the assumption that justice will not be done. But think about it. The vice president of the city council of Minneapolis is black. The police chief is Mexican American and black. The mayor is very sympathetic. The state AG is black. What is the rationale behind the assumption that justice will not be served? Finally, I want you to check out this exchange between Ann Landers and a man who met a girlfriend at a riot. Dear Ann Landers, on April 30 of this year, the LA riots were in full swing. I was with a couple of friends and we got carried away with all the excitement. One guy suggested that we join the rest of the crowd and loot a Korean dry cleaners. The scene was incredible. There were about 20 people grabbing as much stuff as they could before the store was set on fire. That's when I saw this great leather coat hanging not 2 yards from me. I went to grab it. At the very same moment, Wanda reached for it too. She was beautiful, Anne, and she really wanted that coat, so I made her a deal. She could have it if she let me take her to dinner. We hit it off right away, and I knew that night we were perfect for each other. We planned to be married next April. My dilemma, Anne, is how do I tell my parents she's Catholic? Okay, maybe that wasn't the last line. Here was the last line. My problem is this. Many out-of-town family members will want to know how we met. Should we tell them the truth? Baffled in Los Angeles. Okay, I changed the last line so it was funnier.
He's a very strange young man.
I never said otherwise. Now don't forget, my documentary Uncle Tom is coming out on June 19th. Here's one of the trailers.
I don't remember the actual day, but I remember the emotion that I felt when it happened.
I'm often asked, was there an epiphany?
I started asking questions.
As I became more politically aware,
a lot of the way that I saw things began to change.
All of this information I've been taking in for several years.
A continuation of these kind of contradictions.
I had bought into all of these lies.
You begin to see what the real agenda is.
That's usually how that red pilling process begins.
Black America is starting to get it.
People are starting to realize what's going on.
Again, coming to a home theater near you. Check out all the trailers on UncleTom.com. And remember, we've got a country to save. I'm Larry Elder, and I'll see you next time.